Chapter. Okay, go.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Today I will be making a presentation on JavaScript and also some front-end development technologies. And my name is Ina Botchkina, and I'm a software engineer, UX developer, and project manager. And I'm also a former research scientist at the University of California, San Francisco. And I'm based in both New York and San Francisco. So let's start with, so JavaScript is a primary language of front-end development, which consists just a little bit of about the technology of front-end development. So it consists of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML can be thought of as the skeleton of web application or web page. So it's the standard markup language used to structure content on the web. CSS can be thought of as the skin of the application. So it's a styling language used to control the appearance and layout of HTML elements on a web page by applying design rules and formatting. So, and JavaScript is the mind and muscle of application. It's what makes the app or web page alive. So it adds and is responsible for interactivity, dynamic content, complex functionality. So everything that makes a web page alive is due to JavaScript. So, and just a little illustration, little cartoon to reiterate what I just said. So, for example, Frankenstein. So Frankenstein's bones is HTML, and then Frankenstein's skin is CSS, and then JavaScript is what making him come to life. And JavaScript, so here's the symbol of JavaScript, and the S in the middle stands for script. Okay, so JavaScript happens to be the most popular programming language in the world. And here it's shown by the number of active developers in millions as of the end of 2022. So it's and it's followed by Python, which is now the second most popular programming language, and then Java, C, and PHP. Anyway, so JavaScript is the most widely used programming language in the world, and it's used to make dynamic and interactive websites and web applications. And primarily, it's known as a client-side scripting language. So it runs in web browsers to provide interactivity, animations, and dynamic content updates. And basically all the functionality that a web app or web page has is, again, due to JavaScript. But also, although primarily it's a front-end language, client-side scripting language, it also became server-side language, like a backend, basically, via Node.js. So Node.js is a runtime environment that enables JavaScript to be executed on the server side, again, making it basically a backend language and allowing developers to build web applications and APIs using JavaScript. So just key characteristics of JavaScript, and I will go over this pretty on high level. So it's interpreted. So basically languages can be compiled versus interpreted, and JavaScript happens to be an interpreted language, meaning that it is executed directly by the browser without the need for a compilation. Unlike other languages like C and Java. JavaScript is object-oriented, and it has prototypal inheritance, which is a little bit unique to JavaScript, but basically it enables code reuse and modularity. It's dynamically typed, so which means that variables can hold values of any type without needing explicit type declarations, and types can be changed during runtime. With one exception, TypeScript, which is a subset of JavaScript, is statically typed, not dynamically typed. It's also event-driven, So it's actually designed to respond to user actions or events, such as mouse click or pressing a key. So basically, it's because it's a user a UI language for user interface development. Also, it has first class functions. It's asynchronous, which is really important. It's a one-threaded language, but it supports asynchronous programming with features like callbacks, promises, and async await, which allows for non-blocking execution of code, even though it's single-threaded. It's also client-side and server-side, as I just touched upon a little bit earlier. So, and though originally designed for client-side web development, it can also be used for server-side programming with platforms like Node.js. It's also cross-platform and can be run on any platform with a web browser. And I will go over later that it can also be run on mobile phones on different platforms. And it's garbage collected, which means it uses automatic memory management. And finally, it uses an ECMAScript standard, which I will go over a little bit later. But basically, it's a standard, an international standard, which changes every couple of years and defines the core syntax and features of the language. And it's updated periodically. So JavaScript and mobile phones, although it's not a primary language for mobile phone development, it is used more and more commonly in mobile phone, in mobile app development. And again, just for reference, the most common languages for mobile development are Java and Kotlin for Android and Swift for Apple. And both Android and Apple use React Native, which is a subset of JavaScript. So it's important to note that it also a language used in mobile development. And there are several ways of use JavaScript in mobile app development. And I will not, it's kind of beyond the scope of this presentation to go through this, but you can look later at the slides for reference. But there are 4 different ways of run JavaScript in mobile phones. And perhaps that could be a separate topic for another presentation. JavaScript history. So this is a very interesting topic. It was created in 1995 and by Brandon Ike at Netscape. And it was originally called Mocha, which is also a reference to coffee, which is probably a reference to the fact that developers drink a lot of coffee. And then it became JavaScript, not to be confused with Java, of course. It was introduced in Netscape Navigator 2 as a scripting language for web browsers. In 1997, it was standardized by ECMA. So I mentioned ECMAScript in my previous slide. So it just stands for, so ECMA stands for European Computer Manufacturers Association, but it is an international, basically an international organization that is responsible for basically standardizing JavaScript. And the first edition of ECMAScript, abbreviated as ES for ECMAScript 1, first edition, was released in 1997, and it became the standardized version of JavaScript. And then the most important milestones in JavaScript history. So AJAX, basically which stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML, gave the possibility for apps to communicate with the server and update parts of the page. And then jQuery was the first, like the most popular JavaScript library, which simplified DOM manipulation and event handling. And DOM is basically a document object model, which simply means how you can handle elements on the web page. In 2008, Google released Chrome, which included the V8 JavaScript engine, which greatly improved JavaScript performance. And then in 2009, Node.js was introduced, which, like I said, is server-side backend language. Basically, it's a framework to run JavaScript on the server side. In 2012, Microsoft introduced TypeScript, which is a statically typed superset of JavaScript. And then from 2010 to 2016, and actually this process continues currently as well, is characterized by the rise of modern JavaScript frameworks and libraries. And there are plenty of them, but the most popular are Angular, actually in chronological order, not in order of popularity, but it was Angular and Backbone in 2010, Ember in 2011, React 2013, Vue in 2014, Redux in 2015, as well as GraphQL and Svelte in 2016. Out of this JavaScript frameworks and libraries, the most popular currently is React by far. And we should notice that Svelte is actually might be the most recent alternative to React for a number of reasons, and I will go into that later in the presentation. But again, React is the most popular ecosystem of JavaScript currently. And then in 2015, ES6 was released, which is, again, it's ES stands for ECMAScript, and 6 stands for the 6th edition. And it is what the current modern JavaScript is based on. And there were lots of new things, and I will go into that slide later. But for example, var, standing for variable, was replaced by const and let. So these are just the most immediate changes. Like when you look at the website, you can tell if it uses ES6 or if it uses previous versions. And then in 2017, ES8 was released, and one of the most popular notable features was async await for asynchronous, basically asynchronous JavaScript. And then in 2018 until now, so there were new serverless architecture, new frameworks like Next.js, Dino, etc. Also WebAssembly and progressive web apps. Again, this would be beyond the scope of this presentation. Okay, so this was actually the longest slide, so now we will move much quicker. So I mentioned a number of frameworks and libraries in my previous slide. So what are actually frameworks and libraries, and how are they different? So library is basically a collection of pre-written code that just focuses on specific tasks or functionality. And developer maintains control over the application flow and just uses those features of the library that they deem necessary, basically. So what it means is that your code controls the library, or so basically you control the library. And then framework actually has so what is referred to inversion of control. So a framework is more opinionated and it controls your code and application. So basically it's a set of conventions, rules, and tools that dictate the flow of application, how the application should be organized. And developers follow these conventions and build their applications within the framework structure. So it enforces, again, a specific way and structure of building applications. And as an example, for example, React is primarily considered a library because it focuses on providing a way to build reusable UI components and efficiently update the DOM without imposing a specific structure on the entire application. So basically, you as a developer control a library. And for example, Angular is a framework, so it's more rigid, and it kind of dictates how the application should be should be organized. So developers build their application within the Angular framework structure, following the provided conventions. And yeah, so just to reiterate that, so framework calls your code, and but your code calls the library. And then just quickly, JavaScript has a number of frameworks and libraries. And like I said, it can be client-side and server-side. So client-side JavaScript libraries. So there are a number of them. jQuery was the original library, and it's still popular for DOM manipulation, event handling, and synchronous requests. React is a super popular library that was developed by Facebook for building user interfaces, focusing on the efficient rendering and updating of components. So it's component-based. Redux actually is kind of subpart of React, and often is used in React applications to manage application state more effectively and consistently. Lodash is very popular utility library, which just allows more flexibility with working with arrays, objects, strings, and other data structures. Then there is Axios, which is used for making API requests. There's Chart.js and D3.js, which are libraries for creating basically charts and data-driven documents for visualizing. And then, so those were the libraries. And frameworks are, and again, just to reiterate, so frameworks are more comprehensive and more structured, and they impose basically their conventions on the way the application is written. So those are Angular, Vue, Ember, Backbone, and Svelte. I will mention it again because it might be well positioned to replace React in the near future. So it's a modern framework for building user interfaces, and it results in highly optimized, efficient, and small-sized code that directly manipulates the DOM without the need for a virtual DOM. And virtual DOM is one of the main characteristics of React, but again, this is beyond the scope of this presentation, and I'm just going to, stop at this. So now let's go to server-side JavaScript frameworks, and those are Node.js, which was the original platform that allowed JavaScript to be used for server-side development. Next.js, which is very popular. Actually, both Next.js and Express are commonly used in React applications. And so these are actually the most common ones in server-side development these days. And just very quickly to go over some of the libraries. Again, jQuery was the first truly popular JavaScript library, and provided the very easy to use way of handling events. And I'm not going to go into syntax, but basically it offers an easy way to manipulate the DOM, even though lately it became less popular because of React basically has easier ways of DOM manipulation by using JSX, so kind of syntax that is inserted into JavaScript. Anyway, so TypeScript is a subset of JavaScript, which is statically typed versus dynamically typed. And so it also commonly used in both client-side and server-side development, and it was developed by Microsoft. And then very interestingly, of course, Node.js, which is a server-side JavaScript runtime environment. And also it has a large and active community of developers. And its characteristics is that it has a vast array of modules and packages through its built-in package manager, NPM. So you always have to install with NPM. And usually what happens is that you get literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different modules through NPM install. And it's, well, it's easy to find, but also it's very, very extensive and actually takes a lot of room. So basically, but Node.js was originally developed as a server-side runtime environment. So let's look at the current basically alternative of Node. Although Node, like Dino, is not used very commonly yet, but it might be the way of the future. And actually, Dino is Node reverted. So basically, Node. So basically, you just reverted to syllables. It's a word game or play on words. So, and it was developed, actually created by the same developer, Ryan Dahl. Node was released in 2009 and Dino released in 2020. And it focuses also, I mean, it has actually lots of advantages. Security, TypeScript support, which is built in. And then there are standard libraries, which reduce the need for external dependencies. And then there is no need for a package manager like NPM. So you don't need to have those hundreds and hundreds and thousands of different modules and dependencies. And it has built-in tools, and it's more aligned with web standards. So Dino is a great thing. And then, so I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but these are, again, the most popular JavaScript frameworks and libraries. And again, React, some people actually refer to it as a framework, but it actually happens to be a library. And it's the most popular library/framework these days. However, it might be replaced by Svelte at some point, which was recently voted as the most loved web framework. And it has, it actually produces code which is super small and very fast. And interestingly, it actually, the word svelte means slender and elegant. So yeah, so it's much faster than React.js. Okay, and since we're talking about front-end development, I'll also cover CSS frameworks. And so CSS Frameworks is a package containing pre-written and standardized CSS code. And it also often contains actually JavaScript elements and functionality, which is predefined. So one of the most important purposes of CSS frameworks is that it provides responsive design. So the developers don't have to write all those media queries. And so they have pre-built components that are responsive to start with. And the top CSS frameworks are Bootstrap, which is #1, and it does have some JavaScript functionality, such as modals and carousels and responsive menus and stuff like that. And then the second most popular CSS framework is Tailwind CSS. And I will talk a little bit about the difference. And then the next top CSS frameworks are Foundation, Balma, Materialize, Semantic UI, and UI Kit. And it's so basically it's important to see the difference between component-based CSS frameworks, which are pretty much all the frameworks except Tailwind CSS. And Tailwind CSS is a utility-first framework, which means that instead of pre-designed components, it provides utility classes, which can be combined to create unique designs. And it also has a tiny build size, like literally 10 KBs. because all the unused CSS is removed. And it's actually becoming very popular. And just to show how this works, for example, in Tailwind CSS, you just write one line of code, which makes it completely responsive on all the devices. And instead of that, so basically, you can use regular CSS media queries, which, when properly formatted, would take like half a page. So it's much easier to use. Also, you don't have to use an external style sheet, and you just put everything in HTML class. So it's very convenient. Okay, so yeah, so basically it's characterized by utility classes versus other CSS frameworks, which are component-based. And Bootstrap is the most common CSS framework still, but it's very opinionated. So some people say that all Bootstrap websites look the same, but it is still very, very popular, and it's still commonly used. So now let me do a time check. So yeah, so let me just kind of quickly go over the rest of the slides. So the new features in ES6. So again, ES6 is the 6th edition of ECMAScript, and basically this is modern JavaScript. So the most important things, instead of var, let and const are actually used now to declare variables. And there are arrow functions using the arrow syntax, which are just much more concise than regular functions, and have a block-based this scoping. And again, I'm not going to go over this in great detail. Also, there are 4 let-off loops, which actually make JavaScript much more like other programming languages, instead of the traditional loops that it normally uses, which is more complex than in other programming languages. And then there are classes, which is a new feature in ES6. Although some people say it's actually pseudo classes, because JavaScript is still prototype-based inheritance. But now at least syntactic sugar, which means it's just it's the same function, but it looks different. So now there is class, constructor, and extends keywords. And again, it makes it more like object based programming languages. And then there are promises, which handle asynchronous operations, which is a modern alternative to callbacks. Template literals, which is just an easier way to create strings with embedded expressions, and many other features that I'm not going to go into, but it can be, there are references and links where we can look this up. So again, promises are made for asynchronous operation, and it's an alternative to callback functions, which often are referred to in development as callback hell, which means that they're nested inside each other, and it gets more and more complicated. So promise helps to avoid that. And promise exists in one of 3 states: pending, fulfilled, or rejected. So it uses then, so you can see the promise is shown here. So it uses then and catch syntax instead of callbacks. But again, I'm not going to go into this in great detail, into syntax. And then another improvement to asynchronous JavaScript was introduced in ES8 in 2017. And so it uses async await syntax, which is syntactic sugar for promises. So basically it has the same functionality, but it's more it's more concise. It's just like better code. So let's see. Yeah. So, and then if you can look at this in greater detail, so there are lots of links here, which will be available on the slides. And I think I'm actually going to stop here, or actually just refer to the rest of the slides. So basically, there are some links and development tools, and also just a couple of extra libraries. So these are visualization libraries. And the most common ones are Chart.js and D3.js, and some grid libraries. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. Well, first of all, it was very good. Can you return the slides, please? Yes. Yeah, it was very good, very detailed, comprehensive, and interesting. So these are the slides. Yeah, you worked with grids, right? Which grid library you worked recently with? Was it?
So we use data tables. Yeah, we looked in great detail on.
Oh, data tables. It's some. Okay, and
Yeah.
I know you use charts. Can you go slide 29? Yes, this one. This actually the Fireship YouTube channel. It's hilarious. He. Yeah, I really recommend this channel. A lot of, he's a front-end developer, and he, by the way, recommended to use Tailwind and Svelte and other good stuff. I recommend to subscribe to this. Another thing about TypeScript, if somebody today starts JavaScript application, it's probably a good idea to do it in TypeScript. Like that's like a general recommendation because it's stricter, makes it easier to avoid errors. I love the presentation. I mean, it's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Guys, any questions? Hello?
No, it was really good. Thank you very much, Ina.
Thank you so much.
Great presentation. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
Okay.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.